It's great to have so many of you with us, and we hope you enjoy this presentation. My name's Elaine Higgleton, and I'm the International Publisher for Collins Learning. I've been working in educational publishing for many years now, and it's my job to help make sure that the materials that we publish for international markets are as appropriate as they possibly can be for your needs and requirements. And I'm joined today by Nick Coates. Nick is one of our authors. He's also an extremely experienced teacher trainer and consultant, and Nick has been really helping us understand the requirements of global perspectives and helping steer the development work to make sure that we produce good and appropriate materials. So I'll be handing over to Nick later in the presentation. I'd like to start with a couple of polls, if I may. We'd like to know a little bit about how many of you are currently teaching global perspectives at primary and at lower secondary in your school. Please answer yes, even if you only teach part of the framework or only teach perhaps an hour of global perspectives a week. Only answer no if you don't teach any at all.
Okay, so remember to use the poll function, which is at the bottom of your menu. Looks like we're getting a good amount of people putting their votes in, so I'll leave it up there for a few more seconds. Okay, excellent. I'll stop the poll and share the results now, so here you go. It looks like we've got a strong 72% of people teaching global perspectives at primary, and 28% have said no, they don't. And then at lower secondary, we've got a 75% saying yes, they do at lower secondary, and 25% no.
Great, that's really interesting, thank you. So we're now going to come on to our next two questions, which is, does your school teach global perspectives at IGCSE, and does your school teach global perspectives at A level? And again, it's a simple yes or no.
Okay, I'll leave it up there for a few more seconds. Do get voting. This is quite an interesting difference to the first question we asked. Okay, I'm going to end that now and share. So at IGCSE, we have a 67% of the viewers who do teach global perspectives and 33% that do not. And then at AS and A level, there's a 50-50% on yes and no.
Great, thank you. That's very interesting. That helps Nick and I understand how familiar you already are with global perspectives. So what we're going to be looking at today is how the skills for global perspectives are actually skills that overlap with the skills required for English as a first language and as a second language, for maths and for science. And we're also going to be looking at how the Collins course books, the new titles published for 2021 for English, first language and second language, maths and science at primary and lower secondary, can help support the development of global perspectives skills. Cambridge, as you will all know, are very keen for us all to be focusing on global perspectives as skills. When we think about what global perspectives is, it's a skills-based framework and a skills-based set of qualifications. It's designed not to be strictly based on content. Students are not going to be tested on what they know, so whether they can recite, for example, all of the chemicals listed in the table of elements. They're not going to be tested on facts and figures. They're going to be tested on their skills. And these skills are cross-curricular skills. They're things like research, in analysis, evaluation, reflection, and ask questions such as, can I apply what I've researched? Can I apply this thinking? Can I apply what I've learned to my own situation, to me personally, or to my local community or my society, or can it apply globally? And how does it apply globally? We often think of these skills as being critical thinking skills and problem solving skills. And again, as you'll all be familiar, students are encouraged to develop these skills within work on challenges. And again, as you know, and this is all stuff most of you will be familiar with, given the high level of familiarity with global perspectives, the challenges are really research projects that allow students to work collaboratively with their peers, within contexts that are meaningful for them and allow them to understand the relevance of the challenge to their own lives, to their local situation and globally. But that also bring in an opportunity to carry out research, analysis, and the evaluation of data, and to demonstrate problem-solving skills. Cambridge Assessment International Education say teachers can integrate the challenges into their existing teaching and lessons. You don't have to do separately timetabled global perspectives lessons. You can develop global perspective skills in the English classroom, in the maths classroom, in the science classroom. And you can do as many or as few of the challenges as you like. As you know, there are 6 for each stage in primary and lower secondary. And the challenges always come from these topics. The topics in blue are the primary topics, and the topics in black are the lower secondary topics. And you can see these are quite broad topics, and they really, you can immediately see, bring in opportunities to talk about challenges, talk about research, talk about problems at a personal level, at a local level, at a society level, and at global level. I mean, disease and health, with what we're all living through, there are some obvious parallels there. So these are the areas that the topics, the challenges, are framed within. So what we're going to be looking at are 3 things. I'm going to be looking at how the students' books naturally support the skills that are also challenged and tested in global perspectives. We'll be looking at the natural overlap, because there is natural overlap. Then I'm going to be handing over to Nick, who's going to be taking us through the specific guidance that Collins provides in all of our teachers' guides for primary and lower secondary maths, science, and English as a first language and English as a second language. Look at the specific guidance we provide in these teachers' guides for global perspectives. And then Nick is also going to be looking at examples of some of the more detailed work that we have done, which shows you how you can use some of the materials, the ideas for project work, the ideas for research, the ideas for experiments, how you can use those ideas that occur naturally in our courses to supplement, to support, to scaffold, or even to provide alternatives to the challenges that you might be studying as part of your work for global perspectives. So if we think, first of all, about the skills that we are naturally going to encounter through activities in English, both versions, maths and science, let's think first of all about some of the thinking skills. Now, this is an example from Collins International Primary English, which is our mother tongue, our L1 course for international schools. And this is the warm-up introduction in a unit that is about talking about the past and the present and how to compare and contrast. So a lot of the language, the work on grammar and vocabulary is all around comparisons, comparing past and present, how we do that, the structures and the language strategies we need. But you can see this is the warm-up. And this warm-up immediately links to global perspectives skills. You can see that we are asking students to work in pairs. That's collaboration. Pair work inevitably involves communication, because we are talking to our partner about what they think and what we think. We're sharing ideas. We're asking students to look at the pictures. They have to analyse what's going on in the pictures and evaluate what is going on in the pictures. They have to try and reflect on what is going on in the pictures. What do they think the children in the picture at the top are learning about? They have to reflect on what they see and analyse it. How is the ragged school, how is the picture at the top different from the picture at the bottom? How might the schools be similar? But we're also asking them to relate what they're looking at to their own personal opinion. Which sort of school would they rather go to? They have to personalise their learning, and they have to give a reason for that. So this is a warm-up to an L1 language activity, but it's already bringing in global perspective skills, or skills that students will also need for global perspectives. Every time in a Collins students book, every time that we say discuss or ask or talk about, these are opportunities for communication and collaboration. You can see the first example with the picture of the tulips is from International Primary Maths. Discuss with your partner or in your group how many flowers you think. Give an estimate. Give your estimate as a range, but we're asking students to discuss. They are communicating and they're collaborating over what they think the answer might be. And the same here with thinking time. Discuss the questions given below. Give reasons for your answers. You are communicating and you are evaluating with a partner. So every time you see discuss, talk, ask about, you have an opportunity for communication and collaboration. There are opportunities throughout the courses for communication, further communication and collaboration. Here's another example from International Primary Maths. Take turns to use counters to make a 3-digit number. Tell your partner what your number is and how it's made up. Your partner then uses the numeral cards to make your number. So you're having to collaborate to do an activity that relates to maths. So you're actually doing some maths, but you're doing it in a collaborative way, which is a skill that you're also going to need for global perspectives. The second example in the middle is from Explore English, which is our primary English as a second language. We're asking students to think about questions and then to discuss those questions with their partners. And the next examples are from International Primary Science. If we look at the top example, do a puddle investigation. Create a shallow puddle, a deep puddle, and one with a large surface. Work in groups to investigate. So there are plenty of opportunities for collaboration and group work. The activity at the bottom can be done as an individual activity or as a group or pair activity. As you know, if you have students who are struggling with activities in the class, if you pair them up with a peer, put them in a small group for collaborative learning, it often makes an activity more approachable for them. We also offer opportunities within the courses for students to link what they're learning to their own experience, as you saw with the example of the school at the beginning. Which school do you think you might go to and why? Personalising that little bit of learning. We have an example here from International Primary Science Stage 5. This is based on a unit that is about condensation and evaporation. Use a diagram to explain why condensation is the reverse of evaporation. Set up an investigation to find out what happens to ice when it's warmed and record your results. And 3, make a poster to show some ways you could collect water if you were in a very dry place. Students might be asked to do that imaginatively if they live in a very wet place like I do, the west of Scotland, but students can also do this with personal or local application if they live in a very dry place. And conservation of water and generation of water is an important issue. You can immediately contextualize that to your local situation or your personal situation. And you can see the example from Explore English, which is from our English as a second language course for primary. The language is around looking at adverts, looking at different clubs, seeing what the different clubs offer, the different types of activities. You're learning vocabulary around when clubs run, what they offer, what fun you can have. But we also offer students an opportunity to personalise that learning. Which club would they like to go to and why? They could do that as a written activity, they could do it as a spoken activity in a group or with friends. So lots of ways of personalising the learning and thinking about the implications, evaluating the implication, the impact, the meaning for yourself. A global perspective skill delivered through some science and some English. The courses offer opportunities to encourage students to develop critical thinking skills. The green example, Thinking Time, is again from Collins International Primary English. This is from a unit on adjectives that gives students adjectives to learn and gives students opportunities to develop a broader vocabulary range so they have more adjectives to use when they are doing some writing. But what we're asking them in the Thinking Time in the end is giving them an opportunity to think about why it's important that they know a lot of adjectives and to be able to articulate that the greater, the wider their vocabulary, the more creative, the more interesting their writing and their language is going to be, the more accurate, the more precise they can be, the more effective, the more effectively they'll be able to create different opinions and different feelings on the part of their readers. So we're giving them an opportunity to think creatively and critically about why they're doing some of this work. The next example is from Explore English, the primary English course for second language learners. There's a little poem about staying safe on the beach. And then activity number 9, write 2 more instructions for staying safe on the beach, encouraging learners to dig a little deeper, to go a little further independently on their own, to read and be scaffolded by the poem, but then to take it a little further independently. We also have opportunities for problem solving. Our lower secondary English as a second language course has lots of project work in it because we recognise that you are learning language to be able to do things with that language as a communication tool. So we've built in lots of opportunities to use the language, including to solve problems. You can see this is a project about transport. What forms of transport do you use to get to school? So it's immediately personal. How could getting to school be made better? You have to analyse your problems, evaluate them, and then what can be done to solve the problem. Think about the problem and think about how you can solve it. So there's a lot of scaffolding here. The students, yes, are practicing language for communication, but they are also practicing problem-solving skills. You can see, this is a really good example. You can immediately see this would link very nicely to some global perspectives challenges. We also encourage reflection and self-evaluation. These are other important skills for global perspectives. Collins International Primary Science, we include I have learned boxes. You can see the blue boxes there listing what has been covered in the unit to highlight to the student what they've covered, so allow them to think about what they know. International Primary Maths, the example with the emojis at the bottom, the smiley, grumpy and neutral faces. This is from the workbook. Students are encouraged to circle or colour the face that reflects how they think they've done this workbook. It could be that they are really happy because they think they've done a really good job and they found it really easy. That's very important information for you and for the student to match up their actual performance with their own evaluation of their performance. We have self-assessment boxes in lower secondary science. Students can tick what they think they can do, what they're comfortable doing. And we have reflecting on your work in lower secondary English. Compare your response to the sample questions. So anybody who teaches IGCSE English as a first or second language, and anybody who teaches lower secondary English will know that we often encourage students to write an essay or to write a sample response. We then show them an example and we encourage them to evaluate their response against the sample so they can understand where they went wrong and, importantly, how they might be able to improve. So plenty of opportunities to encourage reflection and self-evaluation. I'm now going to hand over to Nick, who is going to take us through some of the more detailed ways that Collins provides support for global perspectives. Thank you, Nick. Over to you.
Thank you, Elaine, and hello to everybody. Right, yes, I'm going to talk about more specific support for the global perspectives, and this is done through the teacher's guides. In every teacher's guide, English, first or second language, maths or science, at the back of the book you will find an appendix called Cambridge Global Perspectives. This is for the new editions. It takes a form of a grid, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen now. Always takes the same format. So on the left, you've got the Cambridge Global Perspectives, whichever of the 6 skills we're focused on. The middle column gives the learning objectives for that particular stage. So we've got recording findings, and then we've got the specific objective for stage 1, recording findings, which is record information on a given topic in pictograms or simple graphic organizers, etc. The third column is where we get reference to the materials in the students or the workbooks or the teacher's guides. So for example, the first one here, it says Unit 26, Lessons 3 and 4. You would simply go to your Unit 26, Lessons 3 and 4, and you'll find the activity we're talking about. Perhaps most importantly are the notes in italics underneath that, which they provide ideas for how to support the Global Perspectives learning objectives and focus onto the specific learning objective, because sometimes the activity in the science or the maths or the English is really quite wide-ranging, covering many of the subject-specific curricula. But there's only one aspect of it we can either focus on or develop to develop the global perspectives skills. And in these italic notes, this will guide you to do that. But I think that point will become clearer when we look at some specific examples. So if we could move on to the next slide, please, Elaine. Hello. Yes, thank you very much. Okay. This is from science stage 1, so primary stage 1, and it's actually topic 1. So we're right at the beginning of the year. We're looking at an analysis skill at the bottom of the page, bottom of the grid, and it's dealing with the identifying perspectives objective. And it's simple, say something known about a topic. We're referenced to topic 1.3, activity 3 on student book page 7, which is shown to you on the right-hand side of the screen. So if we look at activity 3 there, it's very simple. Draw or write about one plant and one animal that you know. Describe each one. Say how they're the same and how they are different. They do this activity, then if we look at the italic note back in the grid, we've got learners talk about the differences between animals and plants using their, I haven't got a full screen for some reason. Okay, all right, using their drawings, I think it is. So the focus note, the italic note is drawing us to attention of the learning objective. So they talk about what they've drawn to say something known about a topic. Okay, if we could go on to the next example, please. Thank you. This is stage 3, maths. And here, the activity we're being referred to is Unit 21, Additional Practice Activity 1 on Teacher's Guide, page 228. And it's not uncommon that these activities relate only to the teacher's book, because very often the student's book is focused particularly on the subject curriculum, but all of the teacher's guides have extension activities or additional practice activities, whatever they're called, to extend onwards and upwards. And these very often can be related naturally to the global perspective skills. So in this particular one, if you can see the what to do section, small groups of learners are given a selection of 3-dimensional shapes, and they discuss and decide how to categorize these shapes. And when they've done that as a group, they draw a Carroll diagram. Our italic note tells us, after completion, discuss the criteria learners selected and how well they were able to organize the information on the Carroll diagram. So that's focusing you on to the use of the diagram and how well they did it, so they can reflect on their diagram and consider how they might do it better in the future. So there's an element of reflection there, but the particular learning objective is select, organize, and record information from sources and findings from research in simple charts or diagrams. It's quite straightforward at this level. We look at the next, right, now we're moving on to a rather larger and more extended activity. This is a debate, and this is primary English first language stage 6. And it's a debate. The rubric is have a class debate. So the students are introduced to the format and the stages of a debate. They're given some pointers in the remember box on how to do a debate well. And at the bottom of the page, they're given a number of choices about what they want to debate about. Now, clearly, there's a lot of things going on there. A lot of stages to the activity. It's going to take quite a long time, the whole lesson, or even a double lesson, depending on how much time you've got. But our italic note is focusing us on one aspect, which is the collaboration, as they stress the need for all team members to collaborate to produce the best debating points, monitor the group work, and encourage full participation. So you're focusing on that because of the our learning objective is the team member introduces useful ideas which are likely to help achieve a shared outcome and works positively with others. Okay, if we look at the next example, which is moving up to stage 9. Here, this is maths stage 9, so a rather more complex activity. You've got these wonderful diagrams, which are rose diagrams, and they represent charmingly the causes of mortality in the army in the East in around 1855 to 1856. They actually relate to to Florence Nightingale and the changes she made to hygiene regimes, which had a big effect on mortality rates. So the students, for their maths, are looking at this rose diagram and interpreting it. Their activities are below, in the bullet points below the diagrams are discuss what this graph is showing, write down some conclusions from this graph, and then doctors recommended new ways for trying to prevent infection in February 1855. What effect did these changes have on the number of deaths? Okay, we look to our grid. The italic note is after learners have identified the trends in the data and answered the questions. So first of all, they do the maths activity, but then ask them to specify the argument that the data supports. And that's pointing us towards one aspect of the learning objectives that we mustn't neglect. So they identify patterns and trends in graphical or numerical data in order to support an argument. That's an important part of the learning objective. So our italic note is focusing us onto that. Right, so that's 4 examples, and you'll find it in all of the teacher's guides. You will have a grid like the ones that you've seen, and you will be given the references to student book material or teacher guide material, which you will be able to use to develop some of the individual learning objectives from Global Perspectives. But if we move on to the next slide, we'll move into the next section, because there are some activities which are wider ranging. And what happens in some cases, learning activities are referred to multiple times in the grids, as they are appropriate to more than one of the Global Perspective skills. These are often larger activities, for example, projects or tasks, larger tasks, and may be suitable to supplement or even replace one of the challenges if you are not using the challenges or want an alternative to one of the challenges. Again, let's have a look at the examples, which I think will make it clearer. Right, this is fairly low level one. We're talking about primary stage 3 science. And you can see from the grid that the same activity is referred to twice on this page. So it's topic 4.2, activity 2, student book, page 49, teacher's guide, page 49. That occurs twice. And there you can see the learner's book activity and the teacher's guide and notes on the right there. The activity, Activity 2, we need to be careful of using up the natural materials from Earth. Make a poster warning people to take care of our natural resources. So the students will collaborate, they will discuss what can be done, and they will make a poster. For the analysis, making connections learning objective, we're told at the end of this activity, discuss how the actions of learners and their families can assist in taking care of natural resources. So they can talk about how things that they can do, or their families can do, or the school can do to manage natural resources. And that links us to the making connections learning objective, which is talk about simple causes of personal actions and consequences on others. So here we're talking about personalizing the activity. The collaboration aspect is engaging in teamwork, and obviously we're encouraging learners to collaborate in the development of their posters. Ask them to discuss and make notes on what they agree to include before they start, and they also collaborate in the design and production of their posters, which covers the learning objective of engaging in teamwork. The team member introduces ideas and works positively with other team members to achieve a shared outcome. Okay, now if we look at the next example, the topic we were looking at there was managing natural resources. And here, that links up to something here. This document, the program overview, is a Cambridge assessment document. It's basically a map through the 9 stages. So if you look on the left, you've got stages 1 up to stage 9, across the bottom the 3 terms, and it gives you a map of how the different skills can be presented across each stage, each term. The main skills are there, but also the topics, which Elaine referred to earlier. And if we look at stage 3, there are 2 topics that we've circled here, one called Sharing Planet Earth and one to replace, reuse, recycle. Reduce, reuse, recycle. And clearly what we were looking at just now on stage 3 science links into that. We're talking about materials, resource management. So it would be perfectly possible, if we're doing one of these challenges, to use the science activity to supplement it, covering the similar ground in a different way. Or if you're not using the challenges, you don't use them in your school, you can still use that science activity and still cover some of the learning objectives for that stage. Let's look at the next example, which is more detailed. Yes, this is another lower secondary English second language. It's a stage 7. And I think, as Elaine mentioned, we have projects at the end of every unit in this series. And many of these projects are useful for global perspectives because they're developing a range of skills. Many of them have multiple entries in the Global Perspectives grid. This one is about festivals. There's a short text about Chinese New Year, some analysis of it. And then in section 4, the students work on another festival. So they can do some research, they can decide how they want to present their work, and they can design and present their project. It might be a poster, it might be a digital presentation or whatever. And then in stage 5, they show their project to each other's. Okay, have a quick look at the grid. At the top, we've got research. Some important points to make here, I think. The italic note is focusing us on 2 important elements of the research global perspectives. It says when learners start step 4, encourage them to develop a research question to focus their research. For example, what are the features of the festival that make it interesting? Because it's an important part of research in global perspectives that it is focused and it's driven by a research question. The children from primary level upwards learn to evaluate, to write their own research questions and evaluate research questions. It's not simply do some research, look it up in Wikipedia and do some research. It should be driven by research questions. And the final sentence there, encourage them to consult a range of sources. So they ought to be looking at more than one source, which might be text or it might be online. This links us to the information skills learning objective. Identify and begin to reference a range of print and multimedia sources and use them to locate relevant information and answer research questions. So it's key that we include the research questions and we use a range of sources. If we drop down to the bottom one, the next one, I prefer to take reflection at the end. Collaboration, fairly straightforward. In step 4.2, ask learners to think about how they divide tasks and be prepared to justify this, to get them to think about and analyze how they actually assigned the roles and divided tasks, which is what the learning objective is. You see the learning objective bullet point, the team assign roles and divide tasks fairly, considering skills of team members and time management. Okay, and then the reflection, well, the reflection is a very short note in the italic note. It's focus on the issues and questions in the teacher's guide notes related to the My Learning box. And the My Learning box is a feature that occurs throughout this course at the end of larger activities, just to get the students to make sure that they stop and think about what they've been doing and reflect on it to see how they might work better in future. The reference in the italic note was to the teacher's guide notes, which are shown at the bottom of the page in that little box with a red line around it. It says, ask the question in the My Learning box. Encourage students to think about their research, and there's some example questions you can ask the students to provoke this. Did you find the information you needed? What was the best source you used? Secondly, how well they worked with their group, so considering the collaboration. How could you have organized the work better? Did you use the time well? And thirdly, reflection on how well they achieved their outcome. What do you like and not like about your finished project? What will you do? Again, I'm afraid I haven't got this on my screen, but what will you do differently in the future to improve the work? So there's guidelines to encourage students to reflect in particular ways which link in with the learning objectives of personal learning, which is identify skills learned or improved during an activity and relate to personal strengths and areas for improvement. Now, like with the previous one, the topic we're talking about here is a festival, which is clearly cultural elements. If we go to the next slide, which takes us back to this program overview, we see stage 7. Communication skill is practiced in term 1. The topic is tradition, culture, and identity, which clearly we're in the same realm as with festivals. So that festival activity can be used here. I'm not sure I mentioned this before, but each of one of these squares is represented by a challenge, one of the challenges available. So let's have a quick look at the challenge that is made available by Cambridge for tradition, culture, and identity. This is just the first page of the challenge. We can't look at it all, but if you see at the top there, skills focus, communication, stage 7, ages 11 to 12. The topic is tradition, culture, and identity. We look down at the bottom, the summary, which tells us what the content is. By the end of this challenge, learners will have developed their communication and collaboration skills in the context of finding out how different families, communities, and cultures celebrate the new year. Right, so the work that we did on festivals, which is also year 7, also within the topic of tradition, culture, and identity, clearly can support what you do here with the challenge. Or if you're not able to use the challenges, you could use that project and other projects which would still enable you to develop some of the global perspective skills. And you may simply decide that you do want to use this challenge, but you actually don't want to talk about the new year because it's being done to death. And you'd rather talk about another festival that's coming up at the moment, which you think the children will be more interested in. Well, you can you can use that project that we looked at just now to focus on other festivals as well. It just gives you an alternative and more choice as you develop your work. Okay, I've gone over that fairly rapidly, but I'm very happy to take questions at the end if you need anything clarifying. But for the moment, I'm going to hand back to Elaine.
Thank you, Nick. That's really interesting. So what we're saying is that Global Perspectives is a very skills-based framework and set of qualifications, and that the skills that students need to demonstrate for Global Perspectives don't have to be taught solely in a Global Perspectives classroom. Many of you teach Global Perspectives at primary and lower secondary, and that's great. You've got time to timetable in one lesson a week or an afternoon a term, or however you do it. You've got time to build in Global Perspectives to your normal school timetable, and that's really good. We're not saying don't do that. We're saying carry on with that. What we're saying is, do please be aware that skills around research, analysis, evaluation, reflection, problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration and communication can also be supported in the maths classroom, the science classroom and the English classroom, the L1 and the L2 classroom. These skills don't exist only for Global Perspectives. They're important for everything students are learning, and your maths teachers can be helping support what you're doing in Global Perspectives if they take opportunities to get children to work in pairs and collaboratively, as we've explained can be done using the Collins materials. Your science teachers might be able to help provide scaffolding for what you're doing in Global Perspectives using some of the activities that are included in the international science materials. Nick showed you an example from primary science grade 3 around natural resources and creating a natural resources poster. That might be one activity that is done in science that actually feeds into the challenge that you're working on in your separate Global Perspectives lesson. We're not saying you have to teach Global Perspectives through English, science and maths. We're saying that the skills for Global Perspectives are also relevant in English, science and maths. Please be aware of that, and please get your students to benefit from all of the wonderful activities that help them develop those skills in English and the other subjects. Get them to benefit from that in Global Perspectives as well. And if at the moment your school doesn't teach Global Perspectives, perhaps you haven't got time in your timetable to put in separate Global Perspective sessions, then do use the Global Perspectives grids that Collins provides to allow you to dip into Global Perspectives, to allow your students to get a taste of what's required, to allow you to scaffold some of your own activities for Global Perspectives if you don't want to embark on the full framework or you haven't got time in your timetable to do that. So thank you very much. We'll now take some questions. May I just say that we are wanting, Collins is in the process of developing more materials for Global Perspectives. We'd really like to talk to more of you about what you need, so please get in touch with me, elaine.higgleton@harpercollins.co.uk, if you'd like to be involved in our research and to help us with this development.